Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today I'm asking the question, should people be able to use third-party tech vulnerabilities as a business? Now that's a question that I had on my mind when I read today's headline over at CNBC, which was Apple sues company known for hacking iPhones on behalf of governments. Now, here's what's going on, and I've talked about this in the past, but this is some new information from today. Apple is suing the NSO Group, which is an Israeli firm that sells software to government agencies and law enforcement that basically enables them to hack iPhones. Apple is seeking a permanent injunction to ban NSO Group from using Apple software, services, or devices, and it's also seeking damages over $75,000, which seems insanely low for this kind of lawsuit. Now, Apple said today that it has patched the flaws that enabled the NSO Group software to access private data on iPhones using zero-click attacks, where the malware is delivered through a text message and basically leaves little trace of the infection. You might remember the Pegasus vulnerability. Pegasus users basically can remotely surveil the iPhone owner's activities, collect emails, text messages, browsing history, access the device's microphone, camera, all this kind of stuff. This is, again, something that's been confirmed and obviously alleged in the lawsuit as well, but this is something that we've known about for some time. Basically, we can do whatever we want with the phone if we have and we are administering the Pegasus vulnerability from the NSO Group onto an Apple device. Now, Apple said that the attacks were only targeted at a small number of customers, and they're going to inform those particular iPhone users that they may have been targeted by the Pegasus malware. Now, Amnesty International, if you recall, said earlier this year, and I talked about this earlier this year, that it discovered recent model iPhones belonging to journalists and human rights lawyers that had been infected with this NSO malware. And what's interesting, too, is that they also had world leaders. A couple of Nobel Prize winners were part of that as well. So this basically was rather huge. A couple of Middle Eastern governments, I'm not going to name, apparently were buying this software and, malware and using this against organizations. Now, the question then is, should other people outside of Apple be able to essentially make money off of vulnerability exploits of Apple's products, or any products for that matter? And honestly, yes, they should, but and this is a huge but. We have to make a critical distinction here. As it breaks down, as I'm figuring this in my head, there are three basic categories for vulnerability here, or the use of it, and each one is not equal. Now, the first one is bug bounty researchers. This is a legitimate way for Apple to learn from outside parties of a vulnerability and compensate the researchers. This is also just so unbelievably needed across all technologies, software, hardware, etc., etc. Basically, a cybersecurity researcher finds a vulnerability, informs Apple, does not publish until Apple gets a chance, essentially, to patch it, or rather a time window for them to patch it, and Apple compensates with them. So essentially, they don't turn into the second category, which is criminals. Criminals that would use a vulnerability to harm others in some way, obviously that's super illegal. Usually this is monetary, so think ransomware, those types of situations. That is obviously illegal. If you have a vulnerability and you're using it to basically harm another, monetarily or otherwise, that's a huge problem. And so the third category is the NSO Group. It's companies that discover and exploit these vulnerabilities. They don't inform Apple, they use them and leverage them to offer an advanced service to essentially a government or law enforcement or whoever it is, maybe the most person with money. They don't directly harm others like a criminal gang, but they do enable others to harm their targets, usually through surveillance, extreme violations of privacy, and stuff like that. That's where you get the surveillance of Nobel Prize winners and everything else by way of the NSO Pegasus vulnerability used by governments and law enforcement and all of that. I'm honestly failing to see the difference here between criminals and a company like the NSO Group in that vein. Obviously, they are not sitting here breaking into people's iPhones directly, but they are enabling others to do that. How is that kind of different than the Revil or Our Evil ransomware gang basically saying, oh, you don't know how to do ransomware? You can come use ours, ransomware as a service, and here we go. They are literally profiting off of Apple's failure in security here and not informing Apple. And then when Apple finds it years later, now they can patch and we have this problem on our hands. Now, if you're thinking, but Nick, your company does vulnerability exploitation, penetration testing, research, all that kind of stuff, aren't you being hypocritical? And no, no, I'm not. And here's why. I will explain the distinction just for those non-technical people or non-cybersecurity people out there. When a cybersecurity outfit is hired to do that kind of testing, it's internal to the company or organization who is paying us to perform those tests. We are not being paid to target someone on their behalf, meaning the company's not coming to us and saying, we're paying you to hit our competitor with a known vulnerability or figure out a way to get into our competitor. We are actually testing the company itself to ensure that their defenses are there. If we were to start targeting competitors on the behalf of another company, that would be considered unethical in my eyes, and we wouldn't do that. That's what NSO Group was doing. Also, for the record, if we were to discover basically an as of yet unknown vulnerability, which has actually happened to us in the past, when our testing is over and complete, we're obviously not telling the company exactly what we did, but we are informing the maker of the technology, like Apple, for example, to our findings so they can actually create and update their software that will help protect our customers as well as other companies out there or people out there that are using that software. That's the difference. And thanks for asking that question in your head or directly at your screen or as you're listening to me. But there's the rub of it all, I think. So NSO Group, I think, quite frankly, deserves to be on the chopping block for this. I think Apple's going to win this lawsuit given what the situation is, and I'm really failing to see the difference between those two. And if you're watching this and you're technical or you work for NSO Group or a similar company, please feel free to set the record straight here in the comments section. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but until then, how are you not kind of criminal? And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.